on the wall that everyone wants to push, and then everything is fixed. And it's innovated, right? Company comes down with, metrics and goals that they need you to hit, and you have a meeting and a brainstorm session and an offsite, and you hit 100 million.
You know what? You're going to sell a lot of community solutions to a lot of people that way.
Oh,
I have the switch.
I got it.
I was actually just on the call before this, and I think before leading up to this call, one of the things I'm interested in talking to you about is like authenticity and leadership, which I've been thinking about a lot. And I had this aha moment. I've been on a couple of management teams, which then also means you're in board meetings. And in both situations, I was the only woman in the room. One was in Silicon Valley, and both in the tech industry, and one was in Massachusetts. One was younger than the other. You can guess which one. I heard this thing the other day, and it was a stupid little internet meme that was going around. But it was about a customer support person who was really struggling, a woman. And her boss and her were like, her boss couldn't understand why she was struggling so much, or like why it was taking her so long to do things. And he started engaging with people, and it didn't take that long. And he was like, I don't understand what's going on. And so they changed names all of a sudden. And all of a sudden she was much more productive because she was using a male name when she was emailing people. Yeah. And yeah. So then I was thinking about it, and I was like, I self-actualize as a very challenging person. Like, I just think because I'm not particularly afraid to just directly say the thing and be like, here's the elephant in the room.
It's called keeping it real. For anyone that doesn't know, keeping it real, keeping it keeping it a buck. I'm going to bring the culture into the episode.
There's a lot of denial going on. And
yeah, people don't want to listen to it.
In the board meetings, the emotional intelligence of people was very low. So like, we were never discussing the real problem. And I was always like, I don't understand this. Like, what's going on here? And anyways, I saw that thing and I was like, oh, maybe I'm challenging because I'm being challenged all the time. Right?
But I think that's a good thing, because
it is. I'm not denying the benefit of it, but
where do you think it holds you back?
Maybe it's not me. People just aren't listening to me, and I insist on being listened to, which is the problem.
Wait, so is it, because I've had this happen to me before, and it was a few years ago, but basically my friends would, because I'm the type where if I learn something, I want to share it with everybody, clearly from having multiple everythings, right?
We're in community, so yes.
So for me, I'm like, okay, like, how do I share as much as I can with everybody? I'm like, yo, this is the formula. This is the playbook. And they're like, yo, bruh, I don't want the playbook. I don't want the formula. I just wanted you to say, like, yeah, I heard you. And like, that was it. And I'm like, oh, you didn't want the full playbook, fam? You didn't want
the switch.
Yeah, I was like, I gave you the switch.
They're like, no, I want the easier switch.
Yeah, they're like, no, not that one. Like, we just, no. Too big of a button, Trav. Yeah. You needed the little one.
I can't do that. That makes me too uncomfortable. I have to work at that switch, right? So the extension of that was, so I learned not to actually share more than I had to, because I was shut down, meaning I could, like, there's only so challenging I'm willing to be in any situation. Right. And then I was like, oh, well, but if I'm not being authentic, I can't deeply connect with people. Right. So I'm self-moderating. So then I'm not connecting. And if I'm not connecting, I can't lead. And so my leadership challenges. So like, this all started looking at a leadership grid of like, this is all the things you have to do to be a leader. And I was like, sure.
Okay. Let me try to like figure out which ones. Ping, I got this. I don't got this. Work on that.
I got all of those things. And I was like, it was a Peter Drucker. It was an image of a Peter Drucker philosophy. And I was like, it completely ignores power.
Mm.
right? And so it's kind of like there's a meme that goes around every once in a while, like it doesn't take anything to be kind, to be this, to be whatever. I'm like, yeah, but if you're being challenged, it actually takes a lot of effort to be kind. Like you have to keep arresting your natural inclination to argue.
It's called the late night FM DJ voice. You just gotta learn how to calm down.
Yes. And not everybody needs to learn how to calm down.
That's also true.
People without power need to learn to calm down because otherwise they're angry and they get completely dismissed.
Yep.
And so I'm like, leadership is not hard because of the qualities of leadership. It's because people don't get listened to.
And that's where I think the rise of people creating spaces for themselves to either talk as much as they want,
Go.
to talk to whoever they want about whatever topics they want, and not to be judged about it. So if you want to talk to someone about morning dog walks to the park at whatever, pace it is, right? Talk to them, do your thing. There's probably someone else out there that does that, right? But
And you can be a leader in that space because people want to listen to you.
Yeah, and like the other thing, well, it's interesting too, because I feel like a lot of the people that I've connected with throughout, the beginning of like lockdown, and now it's like I have friends and relationships with people that are all over the world, just like the same thing that happens in community when you first start in it, and you're like, oh wow, like everybody's like growing up and developing relationships in all these little very small ways. So and so started a podcast and now they have a community. Wait, so and so's got a community too? Yo, they do too. And I'm like, yo, wait a minute. Everybody around me has their own little like gang of people that, you know what I mean?
So the reason I think that happens is because there's no the macro community space right now. If you want to think about the United States, because we both live in the United States, as a culture right now, is toxic, right? So none of us can lead in that community, or very few of us, because, right, like nobody's listening to each other, right?
At all levels.
And at all levels. And in order to feel whole as a person, you need to feel seen and heard. And if you want to have the confidence to go out in that broad community and be challenging, which is required if you want to have a conversation in that broad community, you have to have a community that makes you whole, that you can use as a springboard, right? Like you need to have that space that you can come back to, that's safe, that you will be validated in, so that you're not crazy, right? So it doesn't so you don't get gaslit by everything else going on. So this is why I'm interested in kind of I'm a politics major, so I look back at political movements, social movements, whatever, and it's marginalized people who know how to use community to generate power. And it always surprises people with structural power, because they're like, you don't have any power. Like, what are you doing? And you're like, you don't know.
Talking about resources, fam. What you mean?
You don't understand social power. You only understand the hatchet. And that leadership model is really toxic. So talk to me about that. Like, what's your impression of that? Because I went to a women's college, and so I really lean on that group to be my safe space, as we experience the world differently. And so, like, if people are being insane, we can all go back together and be like, does this look insane to you in the same way it looks insane to me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then I can go out and deal with the insanity and not have it break my psyche. Meaning I may not be able to change it, but at least it's not like I'm not questioning myself.
Right.
What's your, like, I guess my question is more specific, which is, how did you grow up and learn community was so important?
That's a great question. So growing up, I, I don't think it was I'm going to get very spiritual for a second. So for anyone that kind of like thinks about like religion or Taoism or anything about, right, like universe and energy, you think about these things, right? And it I always bring things back to sports
Mm.
for me personally because grew up playing sports, right? So when I was 6, right, started playing baseball. The first thing that I learned was that your mom takes you to baseball practice, right? And it's sometimes like mom got straight off of work at 5:30. She didn't even have time to change her clothes, and she took me to practice at 6 o'clock, right? And at practice, moms would just be sitting there and be like, yo, today was crazy. And I never thought about that. But like that's what the moms used to like get out some of the frustrations from the day, to get unpissed off about having to take all their kids to the baseball practice, right?
Their kids were their social artifact.
Mm-hmm.
They used their kids as the avenue to connect.
Yeah, because I know personally, I know my mom wouldn't be going out making no conversations with people. Just no way. So once you see that, right, baseball and then football season, then you start to realize that it's the same group of kids that you're playing football with, playing baseball with, running track with, right? And then as you get older, it starts to get more focused, right? Then some of the kids who played sports growing up, they stopped, right? And then some of the moms who started going also stopped. So it's like you saw people drop in and out of the sports community locally. But then when you got back to high school, it was all over again, right? You had football team dinners, whose mom was going to host what, right? So then by default, your parents, they didn't even realize it. Like no parents were like, we freaking love this community stuff we're doing. Said no mom ever at a team dinner on a Friday. It's just what we did. Right. And so I think that notion of, that's what I mentioned.
Comment, because I think it's hard, particularly to be male in our culture and be vulnerable enough to connect. So
see, I'm weird because I've been like that since I was a kid because I'm just super curious.
yeah.
So like going down the street.
And I think sports is an appropriate outlet or a socially validated way for men to connect.
Yeah, and I'd say like it teaches us things, and this is something interesting too, to where for me, for example, I went to a private university, African American, and my university probably was like 1%, right? So it was already like I was already, outcast. So on top of that, I was probably one of the few that also played sports. I had a completely different experience than those African Americans who did not play sports versus those who did, right? And so the ones who did, we came out and we were like, yo, we're ready. We made connections. Like we grinded, we got it in. We won some bowl games. We won some conference championships, right? Like we got it in.
Shared experience.
Right. And then you got the other ones like a couple years later, we have conversations and I'm like, yo, what school did you go to? Because we went to school, crossed over, and I was like, yo, why you didn't? They were like, no. And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what happened? And they were like, what do you mean you didn't hear? I was like, I was too busy trying to go back and forth to New York to learn how to be in business. Like, I don't got time. No, I don't know what happened. And they're like, oh man, like you should have heard. And I was like, oh. And then you hear how their difference is compared to yours, and you're like, yo, I didn't have to do any of that.
Mm,
I didn't ever have that feeling on campus. And then you realize that people that were just like you walked in the same shoes in the same campus, but had different experiences.
but they didn't walk in the same shoes.
Oh, sorry. They walked next to you
Similar.
in different shoes and similar
Both had
shoes.
Adidas on. They were just different colors.
Yeah, I wore my Nikes. They had their Adidas on, and I was like, that's all right.
But,
But
but
you get what
but
I'm
I
saying.
think that is a critical uh, foundational piece of empathy, right? To start understanding that your experience may look superficially like somebody else's experience, and they may conceptualize or like it may be completely different. And so you can't make assumptions. Like you can't be like, hey, you look and act exactly like me. You must have like share the same exact understanding of like that experience. And they're like, no. And I think that's like 90% of our problem in connecting with people is we make assumptions based on all sorts of crazy stuff, some obvious stuff and some not so obvious stuff, rather than uh, really asking people and be like, so you are a unique person, Travis. How did you experience that?
And see, that's what, for those that are familiar with negotiation and Chris Voss, that's what he talks about a lot, when you can like speak directly to the person's experience, right? Like when you think about like what is it that is the accusation that you're talking about? He calls these accusation audits.
Hmm.
So the accusation that you're auditing is that, oh, I'm just curious about what your experience was like in school, right? Like, I don't know this, right? You told me you grew up in Delaware, right? You told me that you grew up playing sports, but like, could you tell me what community was like in school for you? Because you going into that, you're not making any assumptions that it was good,
Yeah.
that it was bad, right? Like, what was it like, right? Like, you're just going in like, let me
And
just see.
actually, it's core to why I think communities are so powerful because uh, each of us are unique. We have so many different dimensions of ourselves that no one person or even a small group can answer to all of them. And so what happens in communities are they're excellent matching engines to meet me where I am as I am right now. Meaning, what is my problem right now? What is my perception of the problem right now in this moment? And I may agree with Travis 90% of the time, but right now, Travis can't understand where I'm coming from. So I need Mary or John or like God knows who to see me and say, oh, in that little moment, in that little experience, I have had the same experience and I validate you. And so you can get a diversity of validation rather than requiring it from just a small team or a small number of relationships. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think the other thing that, and shout out to sales leader Scott Leese for being completely vulnerable always. And he has this thing called Thursday Night Sales that salespeople kind of come on, and share. They basically ask questions, and then Scott, Amy, and then Blake Hudson also like go in and answer questions, right? So shout out to all you for doing amazing things. You're just one of the many sales communities that have popped up since COVID, right? And they got sponsors, like it's this whole event in a production. But one thing that he said that I think I was like, yo, I really bang with Scott for saying this. He goes, I love me some Scott, and I think that I'm really good at what I do. And I'm not saying that to be like, oh man, like look at me. But he's like, no, like I'm confident enough to think that I'm okay at handling my own calendar. I'm pretty decent at motivating myself, right? And it's when you do those sort of like positive reinforcements and encouragements, you do two things. You accept yourself, right? So it's self-acceptance as a leader that doesn't happen because no executive is being like, hey, Rachel, like you should go accept yourself and pat yourself on the back for being awesome. That doesn't happen, right? But then the other thing it does is it positions you for growth.
Mhm.
Because if you accept yourself and say that, okay, like I'm a newbie in this testing, inspection, certification industry, and I know that, I'm not going into a conversation being like, yo, I know this. I'm literally telling you, hey, I've been in this for 3 months. I know maybe what a few things are, but like, here's what I'm curious about. Right. And I'm going to use my curiosity to then learn
Yes.
this. Right. And so it's
So you
being
build on that, like you follow your strengths rather than your weakness. And one thing for me that's really relevant is I started to stop having shame about my weaknesses, right? Because you're like, I, and so true confidence is knowing, like, I suck at administrative stuff. Like, don't give me finances. I'm not good at it. Like, if you want a balanced checkbook, that's probably not me.
nope,
I
not me either. Don't do it.
that I offload that piece to other people because like I wouldn't be good at it. Um, that doesn't keep me from being confident in what I am good at. It helps me differentiate the light from the dark, meaning I'm going to look to the light, not the like. I used to think growing up that I had to be good at everything. And the things that I was bad at, I had to spend more time on. And as I've gotten older, I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm never going to be good. Like I could, and I would be frustrated and I wouldn't have any energy and nobody would connect with me authentically because it's not my thing. And the people who love finance are not going to love me because like I'm not adding positive energy over there. Like,
Yeah, like you just have to find that thing, like to your point,
thing. But
that thing.
if I focus on where my energy and attention is, I can I can really connect with the people who want it.
It's really about focusing on people that want to be connected with. That's like one of the first rules people forget. It's like, do I have permission to connect with you on this level? And do we both have an agreement when we go into the conversation that this is where we're at?
If
Right?
there's
Because
a shared purpose, absolutely. It doesn't matter who the person is, right? Like if you both care about the same thing, you'll talk about it. You'll connect on
easily,
it.
easily.
Okay, well, so interesting. There's so many, but we're out of time to like go off on a tangent here. I wrap these conversations up by asking about like what's captured your attention lately, or what has
Ooh.
your mind like churning?
Yeah, so I shared a few things, and even this morning, something that I thought about was just like, what are people going to do when they get challenged about their trust and their accountability?
Mm,
Because the reason I mention this is because I see schools in the news every day. This school is shutting down. Atlanta Falcons player has COVID. Dolphins player has NBA. Everything everywhere. There's always noise about these things, right? And like, I technically am in a position to solve those problems. And so for me, I'm like, nobody's telling leaders that the government isn't going to save you, that the CDC isn't going to save you, and that who isn't going to save you. And so, like, for the challenging thing that I'm wrestling with is like, how do you communicate to executives that they need to start doing things? Because in 4 months from now, we're going to be right back to where we started. And if you thought it was hard then, it's going to be even harder now because you don't have those reserves you had last year.
yeah.
You don't have the contingency plan. And so my biggest question or thing to have relieve people with is like, what are you doing to prepare yourself to not repeat what happened last year? Because
Mm,
most people are like, I talk to 70% of our clients, right? And what we're hearing is that we're good. And so, like, the fact that executives of like these big companies think they're good is struggling. And so, to be someone saying that in the market, and you're like, yo, billion-dollar corporations, you are not good and you're not actually doing your due diligence to check that you're doing what you said you did on your COVID plans on your website. You put that out last April.
Yeah.
So just keeping people accountable.
It's interesting too, because it's an incremental thing that has a cliff, right? Trust is one of those things you can go days or weeks or whatever and have that eat away kind of incrementally, and you hardly notice it. And then there's this inflection point, and you're very, very fragile to that cliff. If you're not growing trust, you're fragile to that cliff, and you don't know exactly where the cliff is.
Psst, secret. All businesses are on that cliff right now. And that's the part to where it's like, how do you communicate that? It's like that. It's like, yeah, you're either going to tilt her off or we're going to find a way to keep you level. Like,
what I have found is there's a lot of anxiety. People know the world is changing.
Yep.
And you and I probably share a bias that community is part of the answer to that.
We'll put that over here though.
But community is very esoteric to that set of people right now. They don't know the how. They don't know how to get started. And a lot of people are telling them to spend a lot of money here, there, and other things. So like, how do I distinguish between a lot of money here and a lot of money there, right? So I think that's what's keeping them from taking that leap. They don't have confidence in which direction to leap.
Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing that just one suggestion for executives, and this is something that we community people talk about, right? Who's being ignored right now? And when I say who, I'm going to put in a business talk and label your organization in parts, right? So when I say who, I'm talking operations. When I say who, I'm talking sales and customer success. When I say who, I'm talking engineering and right, like.
And the old school way of dealing with things is very centralized, and it's too slow, right? So what they're trying to do is pick one off after another. And I'm like, yeah, but like that doesn't work, because
the person take too long, you're gonna be here forever.
Like is gone by the time you get around to them. Like they're gone. Mm-hmm. Like that doesn't work. So that's very prescient. The thing that's intriguing me right now is the role of communications and vision in creating shared purpose and alignment. So I got to thinking about organizations, and I was like, if you chase profitability, you are inherently antagonistic to your customers and employees. You have to squeeze them. Like, at least superficially, like the way you get profitability is paying less or doing less and getting more. And so who are you going to get that from? Either your employees or your customers, right? Like, that's your ecosystem. And so we're all in this divisive, antagonistic state. Like, we all want the Oreo. We all want the cookie. We're fighting over the cookie. And the role of leadership right now is to be like, hey, there is a huge box of cookies out there. Like, stop fighting about the cookie on the table, and let's all go get that box of cookies together, and then we all have cookies.
I'm trying to hibernate when everyone else is out here doing all the other craziness. Like, I'm trying to go.
I feel like we're so self-obsessed in our organizations that we can't see that there's a box of cookies out there. We're all like chasing the cookie on the table inside.
Right. And it's like, no, fam, like if you left the house, and this is something I'm learning too early on, that like if I just left the house more, right, to go adventure and see what I'm gonna pick up, it's like, yeah, you go adventure off into the NFL or the MLB and you're like, oh, look what you found. Yeah. Goody you.
Well, that creates energy, and it doesn't resolve all the problems. There's still problems that need to be resolved.
Right.
But it gets us out of that mode of like, and I feel like so many organizations are having that issue. We're having that issue as a country. Like, you can look anyways, so that's circling around in my head right now about that, like, how do we build that shared purpose, shared value where we all thrive? And why do we accept less than that?
I love that. I'm definitely going to think about that for the rest of the week.
Well, Travis, it was great to have you to connect and hear what you're up to. I love your energy. And I love your perspective on things, because I think you're absolutely right about the trust issue. It's problematic right now for a lot of people. So, well, with that, have a good Friday. Have a good weekend. Don't catch COVID out there.
Nope. Getting my test later today. So we've been getting tested regularly, and it's just one of those, like,
Yeah.
I think it should become normal. And thanks so much for the opportunity, Rachel. It was such a pleasure. And thanks to everyone at the Roundtable team for the support and help coordinating. Really appreciate it.
Take care, Travis.
You too. Bye.
Bye.